Afternoon. This afternoon we are extremely fortunate to have Luis Moreno Ocampo and Professor Julie O'Sullivan to talk about Luis's new book, War and Justice in the 21st Century, a case study on the International Criminal Court and its interaction with the war on terror. Today's event is organized by Georgetown Americas Institute, and we are fortunate to have the ambassador of Argentina introduce the panel. Let me just very quickly introduce the ambassador, Jorge Arguello. It's his second time as ambassador to the US. He has been here for the second round since the beginning of the current government in Argentina 3 years ago. And he was here from 2011 to 2017 in his previous role as ambassador. He has been ambassador to Portugal and to the UN. And before that, he had a very long and important political career, being a congressperson at the Federal Congress in Argentina, also being a part of the Assembly and the City of Buenos Aires and other important political positions. So with that, I will introduce Jorge, who's also a friend of Georgetown, both in his past stint as ambassador here and now in the current one, and supporting Georgetown activities in Latin America throughout his time in Washington. So Jorge, thank you, and please.
Gracias, Alejandro. Muchas gracias. Good afternoon. It's an honor for me to be here at Georgetown University once again today with all of you, and ready to listen the introduction of Luis Moreno Ocampo, my old friend, who will be presenting, as you all know, his latest book, War and Justice in the 21st Century, a case study on the International Criminal Court. Most of you, I'm sure, know Luis Moreno Ocampo, an outstanding Argentine who early on in his career was deputy prosecutor in the junta trial, a cornerstone in our history that brought to justice the most brutal military dictatorship ever in our country, and one of the worst in the whole world. This is a part of our history that probably some of you have discovered recently with the Argentine film Argentina 1985, which is currently nominated to the Oscars. A movie that allows us to have an insight into the real story of Julio Stracera, the Argentine chief prosecutor, and the talented, committed, and inexperienced young men who shared such an outstanding responsibility, Luis Moreno Ocampo. After a remarkable record as prosecutor and as a lawyer in Argentina, he was appointed by 78 nations as the founding chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court in the year of 2003. He received the unprecedented mandate to lead the court's investigations for trials in 17 different countries. Moreno Ocampo's new book brings us a unique perspective on the inside story of the International Criminal Court, the ICC, told by his first chief prosecutor. A chief prosecutor that began his work when there were serious doubts about the ICC's viability. In this conversation with Professor Julie O'Sullivan, Moreno Ocampo will present his view on a fragmented international legal systems operation and the relationships between legal and political decisions. Before giving the floor to Luis, I would like to also present the moderator of this conversation. You all know Julie O'Sullivan. She is Agnes Williams, Sesquicentennial Professor at Georgetown Law Center. In 1991, O'Sullivan joined the Criminal Division of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York as an assistant U.S. attorney, primarily prosecuting major white-collar crimes. Julie O'Sullivan has written many articles and the leading casebook on white-collar crime, and is a recognized expert on U.S. federal sentencing guidelines and white-collar criminal law. She is increasingly focused in the subject of cross-border criminality and law enforcement. In 2010, she served as a visiting professional at and then consultant for the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. To conclude, I would like to thank to Georgetown American Institute, Alejandro Werner, thank you very much for co-organizing this event with us, with the Embassy of Argentina in Washington. And also to Luis Moreno Ocampo for joining us today. Luis, we are very much honored to have you with us today. I hope you enjoy as much as I will this engaging conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you for that introduction. As the ambassador noted, I did spend a summer as a visiting professional at the International Criminal Court. I thought it was going to be an academic boondoggle and prosecutorial sightseeing. I thought I'd see a lot of museums and travel around The Hague and Amsterdam. And then Luis decided otherwise. He put me to work. So I spent the summer working for Luis and came to have an enormous admiration and appreciation for his talents and his integrity. So Luis starts his book by, or uses his quote throughout, "The people who participate in the events make a difference." Is that Tolstoy? Yeah. He uses it a lot, and I will say that Luis has made a big difference in a lot of events. As a litigator, obviously, as a litigator in Argentina, he was involved in these trials that made a crucial impact on the country's transition to democracy. And he brought a lot of lessons from that experience to the ICC, not just how to make complex cases, but also how to count for success. So success is not how many prosecutions you bring, how many convictions you secure. He learned from his mother, I believe, right, that a lot of it is changing public perception, that the education that can be achieved through the process of justice can heal damaged communities and can also lead to democratization. But the reason I'm here, obviously, is Luis's appointment as the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. We're going to try not to assume that you know too much. The International Criminal Court is the product of a treaty called the Rome Statute that's now endorsed by, is it 161? 121 state parties. So that means it's a treaty regime. It's not a UN organization. And at the beginning, in 2002, when Luis was appointed, there were basically 3 employees of the building. Luis was by himself, looking around him thinking, how am I going to take this amazing idea, this unprecedented idea of creating a permanent international court to pursue the worst crimes you can imagine, war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and aggression. How can I make that a reality? And I think you cannot overstate the achievement that his achievement in taking that idea and actualizing it. He created an office of very professional prosecutors who were able to do incredibly complex cases in really fraught political environments in 17 countries around the world. And that is no small achievement. Luis is also an academic of sorts. He is one of the things that makes him unique among international actors is that he loves talking to academics. Not many of you do. So he's going to talk to us today about his latest book, War and Justice in the 21st Century. When you read this book, you'll see that what he's trying to do here is data fusion. He's trying to take academic insights, scholarly work, and fuse it with practical history so that we can take lessons, right, to address the complexities of international criminal law and justice. It's rare you can say that only one person in the world could have written this book, but truly, only one person in the world could have written this book. No, I think my sense is that if anybody is interested in international criminal justice, they have to read this book, because there is no other way to appreciate the various dimensions, both personnel, political, institutional, financial, and otherwise, that go into making or trying to achieve justice after extreme violence. So, with that, I'm going to turn this over. It's my great honor to introduce to you Luis Moreno Ocampo.
I need to read this. Is it working this? Okay. Thank you, Julie, very much. I really appreciate this conversation. It's the first time for me to talk about the book in technical words, because as Julie said, I have a very unique responsibility in a new field. There was no previous prosecutor or individual in the world doing in a defined where international criminal justice should be applied. This never happened before. At Nuremberg, there was basically Stalin and then Roosevelt and Churchill who decided to do Nuremberg. At Yugoslavian Rwanda tribunals were the UN Security Council for crazy decisions, the crazy conversations. But in Rome in 1998, the state decided that one individual, the prosecutor, will trigger the process to include international criminal justice into a sovereign country. Imagine the dimension of it. Imagine if how many Americans are here? Raise your hand. Okay, imagine what you think if suddenly in 2005 I say, look, President Bush, you're indicted. Some of you say yes, some of you say, oh my God, what is this? It's a very, very unique position. You can decide to intervene in a national setting and decide, okay, I will investigate this crime. Never happened before. Never happened before. And that's what they gave to me. And one of the things for me interesting about the academic world, this is a field defined by law, implemented by practitioners, with no scholars focus on it. Because for international relations scholars, law is not part of the field. So they don't care. I remember Stephen Krasner, who I suppose you know who Stephen is. Stephen is the head of the dean of the International Relations School at Stanford. Very lovely and smart person. And he told me, Luis, you have a problem because law is not part of my discipline. I said, okay, Steve, but you have to understand, law is not just utopia. Law creates power. These are the dimensions of the law. You are not thinking about it. When they gave me this position, they gave me this incredible power to open investigations against 78 head of states. So you don't understand that, you have a problem. Because it's power, it's new power. No, Luis, you have a problem. Law is not part of my discipline. That's it. And he's the most open person I know in international relations. How many of you study international relations? Okay, I need your opinion. Lawyers, on the other side, and Julie is one of the few lawyers who understand these complexities, believe everything is law. Because when you go to court, the judge has all the power. So it's no other power. So it's not a power relation there. And therefore, that's why when you study law at the national level, predicting what the judges will decide is important because the judges have all the power there. So these two worlds are dissociated, and my job was to connect them. And when I finished my job, I was thinking, okay, how we explain what we did? And then we decided, I spent 10 years writing this book. So I wrote it, and I am probably one of the few persons who read entirely the book. But it's fine. That's fine. That's why we're doing movies. Because no one, look, I wrote a book, talking about books and movies. I wrote a book about Argentinian case to promote this, and we republished a book. And the publisher was very happy because we sold 12,000 books in 2 months. But the next month, the movie did 1 million viewers in 1 month. So the book was 1%. And now, through Amazon, it's going to 10 million people. Lionel Messi, our football player, made a comment last week about the movie, 2 million more viewers. And yes, because he had like 360 million followers. Yes, exactly. Okay, but that is what to understand. The professor had to understand, guys. You are talking to this niche, and okay. So this is with my comment on the Professor O'Sullivan comment. I navigate in these different dimensions, and this is the first time I focus in pure academic and legalistic view of my job. And my point, and this is the point of my conversation, is we don't see the legal designs. Legal designs are almost invisible, but they are a matter of life or death. And this is not a metaphor. In Argentina in 1976, if you were abducted and you were in police, and the police put your name in the book, you could be tortured but not killed. If your name is not in the book, you could be killed. So this protocol, this formality, define your life or death. Today, if for some reason the intelligent U.S. community consider you an enemy combatant, an insurgent, you could be killed. No problem, legally. And so it's not a metaphor, it's a matter of life or death. So what I learned when I was appointed, my job was to understand exactly the legal design and implement it. And I think that is crucially important because I don't know why, maybe Julie can explain to me, maybe because the legal education in the US about judges' decisions, you are not understanding the legal design. When you discuss well, if you understand the US Constitution, you can understand the Rome Statute, no? It's simpler. Because at the end of the day, the idea is you have a constitution establishing a confederation with rights in different places. So each state has different idea how to write, but you have the U.S. Federal Congress, the U.S. Constitution, the Supreme Court in particular, who harmonize your values. So criminal law is mainly a state law. But what happened with George Floyd could not be legal in any state. No country can accept to kill, to consider an African-American people no rights. No. The police go to jail. Was illegal. Because the US Constitution defined a standard who harmonize. And in fact, Theodore Roosevelt, in 1910, he is my guy. Theodore Roosevelt in 1910 said, the US Supreme Court helped different states to harmonize the problem between them. So we had to do something similar at the global level. So it was Theodore Roosevelt, for me, the first person who envisioned this idea to have a global court doing this, basically helping states to interact peacefully between them. Why there's no more wars between Alabama and New York? You have the US Congress and you have the Supreme Court to harmonize the conflict. So you have institutions to manage the conflicts. It's funny, realist Stephen Balt, I remember I was teaching at Harvard for a while, and I always invite Stephen Balt to come to my office, very smart guy. And he loved this idea, oh my God, this law, blah, 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 utopia. Look, everything is to see this, is still valid. To see this, is still valid. No, in to see this, you see the minus, people from minus were minus, I don't know, minus, were talk to Athenians talking about justice. I say, justice is relevant. Those with power do whatever they want. And that's it. And for Steve Balt, it's still valid because in ancient Greece, 5 centuries before Jesus Christ, the legal design was that if you were an Athenian citizen, to be killed, you need a trial. But outside the walls of Athens, no mercy. They kill with no mercy. So what Steve Ball was thinking was right. But Steve is missing that in the end of the 19th century, a national state was created in Greece. And since that moment, it's impossible to have a fight between Sparta or Athens and Minos, because the same country. You cannot fight between Los Angeles and Memphis. No. You have a system to organize the thing. But international relations realists believe they are realists because they see the only way to solve conflict is war. Because that was the traditional way to solve conflict. But civilization was progressing, no? And so national state helped to reduce wars between cities and people, but at the same time, so the legal design is a matter of life or death, because the national state harmonized tribes and avoid conflict between people within the national state. The problem is, at the same time, the national states create conflict between national states. So war is still a mechanism used by nations to confront each other. And so legal design was important at the national level, but we had nothing else. And then after the First World War and after the Second World War, there was attempts to invent something to manage national states. No? You know that. And the UN Charter was approved. But the UN Charter recognized the legal design is based on national sovereignty. The UN Charter recognized states as sovereign states. But it provides authority to the UN Security Council, and within the Security Council, provide authority to 5 countries to veto decisions if they don't like it. In my book, I compare the legal design of the UN Security Council like a poker game. The rules are the same. The cards change in each hand. And the rules in this UN Security Council poker game are that 5 players, when they don't like the card, they say, stop this card, stop the hand. This hand ended. That's it. And they have the legal authority to do it. But the funny thing, we keep playing. They keep playing. Okay, hand is over, new hand. Okay? And so they are placing, you will see in the book, if you are a smart player, and the French ambassador was a very smart player, he managed to obtain, in 2005, a UN Security Council referral to the ICC. And how he did it, you have to read the book. But he played that hand very, very smartly. So, and that is for me what we need to learn as lawyers or international relations people. You cannot predict what will happen reading the core decision. In fact, the core decisions are almost irrelevant. I'm sorry. Are relevant for the individual responsibility. The core decisions are relevant for individual responsibility. To understand if Tomás Lubanga was well or bad convicted, if Laurent Gbagbo was well or badly acquitted, or Bemba. So in this sense, the court decide on the individual responsibility. But to predict the order, no. That's the point. So the game is different. It's different. In fact, when I took office, I say that if you understand the legal design, the best outcome of this court will be no case. Because the court is based on the idea of complementarity. So assume, like in Colombia, Colombia has crimes against humanity. However, Colombia is conducting national proceedings. Therefore, the best outcome for the court will be that Colombia does the proceedings and the court does not intervene. And that happened, in fact. So and in fact, it's interesting Colombia because Colombia is a great example for me of the new role of the ICC. Because I went to Colombia in 2007, met President Uribe, and he was trying to convince me not to intervene. Explain to me how many cases Colombia did against paramilitaries and guerrilla leaders. I said, yes, President, you're right. but there is no case against the army people. And you have what you call the false positives. People killed, alleging they were guerrilla, they were not. So he said, let me do it. And he did it. So that is for me, the best case I did is the case I never did. And that's why I explained to the judges in my swearing, they were not happy with my swearing, but I say that the best outcome of this court will be zero case. Because zero case means the national courts are doing the cases, or better, there are no crimes against humanity, no genocide. That's the best. That's the goal. The goal is not to have very good cases in court. The goal is to have no cases in court. That's the system we built. So, back. For me, the point is, legal designs are a matter of life or death, but are invisible. And then your roles define your game. Ambassador here is representing Argentina. So he takes care of Argentina interests. He cannot jump on Ukrainian-Russian conflict and say something about them because it's complicated for him. He's beyond his mandate. So our legal mandate defines our roles. That's one of the, now I'm teaching a USC Cinematic Arts School in Los Angeles. And I talk to scriptwriters because I like to understand how emotions play a role because, we are not stopping. If we are to understand the legal design, we have to understand the society. And what I learned is wars make leaders popular. We have wars. George Bush became much more popular when he went to war in Iraq. Today, Putin is more popular in Russia because he's in war. Wars, even today, the US Congress did not change the authorization to use military forces in Iraq. After we know it was a false pretext, was wrong, it's still valid. And President Trump invoked this authorization in 2020 to kill an Iranian general in Iraq and many Iraqi citizens. And here, yes, we're happy. So that's the point. As soon as we kill enemies, we're happy. And that we need to change. And it's not about law. It's about understanding the other side and the consequences for us. That's why I went to UC to understand before, the truth is, I spent 6 years at Harvard, and I remember I present the first draft of my book 4 years ago, and my friends, 20 professors, were happy, okay, Luis, no problem, but no one cared. They don't care about it. It's like it's foreign law, it's relevant for us. That's why I decided to include the war on terror part, to show the connection, because I was involved in the decision to create the International Criminal Court, but also I saw the interaction with the war on terror. And the book is about that, these two interactions. And in fact, the two models are the two models in the 21st century transforming the sovereignty. You have, in the 21st century, you have still state sovereignty, still the UN Security Council with the veto power and the poker game, but you have two new legal models. One is the Rome Treaty, where 121 states today, those in blue there, dark blue, are the countries who delegate authority to the prosecutor to open investigation in their own countries if they fail to conduct genuine proceedings against crimes under the court jurisdiction. So this was a collective international exercise to transform the approach on violence. Violence will be perceived by the international community as a crime. So, and suspects have rights. So we cannot kill President Bashir for genocide in Darfur. We can indict him, but we cannot kill him. In parallel, the war on terror defined a different path. Until September 11, 2001, the legal design was international terrorism was perceived as a law enforcement activity. That day, in the middle of the day, after the second tower fell, President Bush decided it's a war. He did not evaluate the consequences of what he said, probably because he felt he had no time. And he felt he needed to react. And he said, okay, it's war. So he ignored the lesson learned in Vietnam, what happened with US in Vietnam, and he ignored his own. You have a military analysis, US military analysis, criticizing the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan, saying the Soviets ignored the experience of US in Vietnam, and they did not realize that invading Afghanistan was united all these Afghan tribes against the infidel invader. So they say that in reports in the 80s. But President Bush had no time, so he had no idea what he was doing, but he learned the idea of war. And, okay, I don't know if you remember, the Senate was, a few days later, the Senate, by consensus, no, 0 vote against, say yes. In the House, the one, Barbara Lee, is the one person, one woman, who say no. One vote, and she was, of course, she was a traitor. Even her father was a colonel. She was considered a traitor because she was against the war. But one vote. Everyone was in favor of the war. 20 years later, you were defeated. And we are not discussing that too. So it's remarkable the ability of US to ignore their own mistakes. It's remarkable. That's why you need foreigners come and say, okay, I need you helping.
Thank you, Luis.
Exactly, Julie. I need that. One thing I expect from you is how can I tell you in a nice way you are doing mistakes, killing people.
It's not nice to say it.
Sorry?
It's not. There's no nice way to say it. I think you just gotta say it.
There's no tactful way to say that.
That's a better way to put it.
Okay, let me try exploring. Because the problem is, in fact, Bush committed the biggest mistake, launching the war. In fact, you have experience arresting individuals international. You arrested Noriega in Panama, sending 15,000 troops. So you learned how to do that. You did not. You invade first Afghanistan and then Iraq. And the problem for me is, and that could be more controversial, I could understand Bush's decision. And he had no options in those days. But 7 years later, President Obama took office. And no think tank, no George Washington University, no Harvard, no one proposed President Obama a different plan. No one. So he invented his plan, and he ended using 8 times more drones than Bush. So you elected President Obama as a candidate against war, and he became the leader of the permanent war. And that's more difficult to say, or not? A little more, yeah, I see your face. Because Trump was later, Trump is off. No, I'm sorry. The problem is when President Obama, the anti-war candidate, became pro-war, it's creating a conflict because now those who were against war with Obama cannot criticize Obama. It's my leader, it's my party. Therefore, war became the new normal. And that's the problem. And that's why I need, you see, Julie now is more upset with me. I need some assistance. How to present this in a way. I don't care about being controversial, but the problem is I like to be useful. Mm-hmm. That's the point. How to say that in a way that is useful. And for me, what we need is more legal designs. We need to invent a new way to control terrorism. The lawyers are not helping on that. And so, okay, I have no time, but we have to discuss what to do with Putin today. Mm-hmm. Maybe 1 minute on Putin. Putin, the interesting thing is, Putin committed clearly the crime of aggression. The crime of aggression is defined by the Rome Statute. However, the US in particular, but France and UK follow, decided that in the crime of aggression, it's not enough that the territorial state where the crime is committed is part of the ICC treaty. It's also, they put as extra requirement that the the nationality of the aggressor. The aggressor should be also a state party. Therefore, as soon US, Russia, China, and all the state parties, they have legal immunity on aggression crime. So that's why my book started with it's a failure by design. The international global order is not adjusting to the new 21st century. That's the problem we have. And Putin aggression is a clear example. However, what we need is clever people trained by George Washington. Georgetown, I'm sorry. Oh my God! You see, my career as diplomat was very. My career as diplomat, I am very glad I never started because it would be very bad. So, Georgetown people helping us to look for alternative, because when the legal design is not working, we have to invent how to harmonize different paradigms. And today, what's happening is we are just doing war against a nuclear power. So what are we thinking about it? How can not fix a solution? What we think will defeat Russia? And what happens if we defeat Russia completely? What happens with the atomic nuclear weapons if Putin is not used before he is in jail? What happens with the nuclear weapons? Who are in charge of the nuclear weapons in Russia? So where are we going? So, but when you think in military power, your only tool is escalation. So we're going nowhere. I don't see legal limits will be enough, but we need to harmonize diplomatic negotiations, military efforts, and legal efforts. In terms of legal efforts, the contribution of the ICC could be important, because Ukraine, even there is not dark blue, accepts the court jurisdiction. And the office of the prosecutor is engaged. And Ukrainians can prosecute war crimes, but not against President Putin. President Putin has immunity. Therefore, the ICC complementary role is to prosecute President Putin himself, because there is no head of state immunity before the ICC. So how to do it? It's difficult to prove aggression crime is out, because legally cannot do it. On war crimes, it's difficult to do it because President Putin is not in the chain of command to decide the targets. So it's difficult to prove his responsibility. However, it's one kind of crimes against humanity as forced displacement. Those people forced displaced from the border between Russia and Ukraine are displaced by the decision of President Putin to invade Ukraine. And therefore, we can prosecute him for that. And I'm not saying put him in jail, because one thing you have to understand about the ICC, expectations are different. At the national level, you expect when a judge or the prosecutor issue a warrant, the police go execute it. There is no such global police. But it's a constraint. And President Bashir from Sudan is an example. When I indict President Bashir, everyone was against, saying, oh my God, you destroy everything. No. President Obama used the arrest warrant against Bashir to make a negotiation with him. In fact, Richard Williamson, the Bush ambassador, was great. We were in a conference together, and he talked after me, full of people from Darfur. He said, okay, I see Ocampo is very popular here. Let me be clear. I don't like ICC. I told Ocampo not to indict Bashir. That will make my life as a negotiator very complicated. Third point, when Ocampo indicted Bashir, I took advantage of it. Yeah, that's it. It's not about love or no love. Be pragmatic. That's what you should do. So, an indictment of President Putin could provide leverage to a negotiation. And that's the maximum that ICC could do. But then, real political leaders understand the game and fixing the problem. If not, we have a nuclear war in Europe and the world. That's the consequence. So legal design, exactly. But it's crazy, but it's happening. It's crazy that it's happening, and we're not discussing. That is crazy. That's why legal designs are a matter of life or death, but almost invisible. Julie, that's it.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm not sure how many of you actually know that much about the ICC treaty. So It may help you just to know a few things.
No, go. No, don't.
Okay. Let's hear your questions.
No,
my questions.
My question.
Okay.
Your question.
Well, so a case can come to the IC. All these people, all these blue states have agreed that you as a prosecutor could, if you find that there are war crimes or crimes against humanity or genocide happening on these jurisdictions, Luis could bring a case, right?
Karim Khan.
Yeah. Now, also the Security Council could bring.
Yeah.
Yeah, and state parties can also refer it as they have in Ukraine.
Any sovereign state can accept jurisdiction.
Right.
Sovereign state can accept jurisdiction or be state parties.
Right.
The Security Council can refer situations.
But you could bring your own cases.
Just in the blue countries.
Right.
Just in the countries who are state parties.
Why was that so controversial? The United States wanted to restrict your jurisdiction to only cases that the Security Council referred to.
Yes, because if the United States invade a blue country, I can investigate him like if Afghanistan happened.
Right.
So that's what U.S. perceive, and they don't like that.
Yeah.
Jesse Helms, Senator Jesse Helms say, there's the American government, American people, American government, and God. That's great, no? Nothing between God and American government.
Yeah.
That's it. That's
Yeah.
the concept.
Yeah. Well, so also states can, the ICC is supposed to be the last resort, right?
Yes.
So it's better, this is why it's good that you were the first prosecutor, because you were aware of how important a state domestic prosecution could be.
Yeah.
And really,
But also, that was the legal design.
right.
Complementarity.
Right.
That was it's not the Supreme Court. It's the court that intervene when states are not doing their job.
Do you think you could?
So imagine, it happened here also when Rodney King was acquitted
Right.
in California,
Yeah.
in Los Angeles.
Yes.
The federal court, the federal prosecutor issued indictment, and then the federal court acted by default
As
because
a
the
fail-safe,
inactivity. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, exactly. It's that model.
Did you view your role as helping states make those cases?
In Colombia, yes.
Mhm.
In Guinea, yes. In Darfur, no.
Yeah.
Because in Darfur, the government was committing the crime themselves as
Right.
a policy. So
Right.
it depends.
So in your book, you talk about how your perception of the Security Council changed a little bit. In the beginning, you thought they might be helpful in securing state cooperation because, as one of the ambassadors said, you didn't have an army, right? You don't have any power. So you have to rely on the states to help you. How did your view of the UN Security Council
Okay.
change?
Talking about the army, I was teaching at Harvard in those days, and a colleague of mine told me, Luis, it's a great honor to be the prosecutor, but you have to reject it. I said, why? Because it will be a shame for you. Without the U.S. support, you cannot investigate, you cannot arrest people.
Yeah.
Therefore, you will be 9 years in The Hague doing nothing and receiving a salary. That was his prediction. This is wrong. I knew, okay, thank you. No, I will manage. But in those days, being a lawyer, I was thinking the UN Security Council is the biggest legal authority in the world, so it would be great to have them on board. I discussed that with my legal advisor, who was a diplomat, Argentinian diplomat, because Argentina was the reason I was there. And this one Argentinian lady was a legal advisor in the UN embassy before the UN. She was from the beginning involved in the Rome Statute. She became the vice president, and then I hired her to be my chief of cabinet because she knew everything about this. She was very smart. She is very smart. So she's the expert, super expert. I was completely ignorant about diplomacy. And then I asked her, okay, will be great to integrate, to dissipate the fears of the frivolous prosecutor. It would be great to integrate our work with the UN Security Council. How we can get the referral? And she laughed. Said, you are ignorant. You're so ignorant. You have 9 years tenure, you will see no referral in your 9 years. Okay. So, but in fact, I was ignorant, but the world changes so fast that 2 years later, the Security Council referred our full situation to us. And so that was the evolution I saw. So I was thinking it was great. It was a mistake. But then the French ambassador at the UN Security Council moved the people and forced Bush to accept the referral. Because it's a multipolar game. During the Bush administration, Colin Powell was pissed off for what he had to do on Iraq. When he received information about Darfur, he decided it's a genocide. And he informed President Bush it's a genocide. And the evangelists in the Congress were also lobbying for genocide. So was a strange combination of forces, and Samantha Power writing books. So a strange combination of power made that Colin Powell announced the genocide, and that promote U.S. as a big supporter of that fool. Therefore, for President Bush, was complicated to veto a referral. And China was ready to veto, but in those days, China was never working without consensus. It's a very long Asian tradition to respect consensus, and China respected that. So China was willing to support U.S., but without U.S., China would not be against all the others. It's not China's tradition. You can read the speech of the Chinese ambassador. It's basically going to veto, and at the end, he abstained, because China is not doing that. So the funny thing is the dynamic is much more complex.
Right.
And that's why you need to understand the game, the rule of the game, to understand the outcomes.
Right. So you've got an institution over here that has its own mandate and its own interest, and you're trying to accommodate it to this legal structure, as you say. Right. Now, I want to challenge you a little bit on the terrorism thing. Right. I know you think the war on terror was a mistake, and I agree with you in some respects, right? But could an international institution effectively address terrorism? Could the ICC, right? Because it doesn't have universal jurisdiction, and it is limited by its own structure and its own jurisdiction.
I agree with you. I don't think we need the ICC on terrorism. First, for September 11, you don't need any international court. You can do it from here. You can
Only if you invade the country.
No, the
Right.
crime was committed in New York and
Right,
in
but
Washington.
you get the individuals
You have to arrest them. That's
Right.
different. But you send 15,000 troops to Panama to arrest Noriega. Okay, and with less people, you can arrest
right.
Bin Laden. And in fact, you let him go. So
I didn't let him go, but
No.
I understand what you're saying.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
You
it's
see,
okay.
I could be very controversial. Oh my God.
I'm just trying to. Yeah,
No,
go ahead.
I need your question. Yeah. So that's the point. So you need for Osama bin Laden, and what you should do is invent anti-terrorist court.
Would they have the ability to secure his presence in a courtroom any more than the United States would?
Not first. You don't kill people. You collect evidence. Look, in the grand jury investigation, you don't need to show the evidence, to disclose the evidence to the defendant. You collect the evidence and you say nothing. You can do the same against any terrorist in the world. A court, international court for terrorism, with the grand jury rules, and so a court review the indictment with confidentiality, not informing the defendant, and they go and you arrest the people. And you can put rules that these people in this special circumstance could be in jail for 5 years or 10 years without trial. And it's much better than kill him. And then if you have to put trial, you can put people in trial. If not, at least we isolate people for 10 years. So there are rational methods to do that, and not so remote from the U.S. practice.
I guess the United States did pursue criminal prosecutions in the first World Trade Center bombing. They actually did put people in jail for that. But politically speaking, this is a great design, but is it politically feasible in a moment like after 9/11?
Well,
To have a sovereign state say, yes, you've blown up half of New York, but we are not going to take unilateral action. We're going to rely on an international tribunal.
No. For Bin Laden, you could all those involved in the crimes against you can indict here in the U.S. Even you can give them military court, no jury. That's it. It's easy. You can do that without any international tribunal. In the future, to confront international terrorists, you can promote a system of international courts for terrorism, and that would be much more useful. Oh my God! Did you see the Apache helicopter shooting people in Baghdad? Okay, one of the persons killed was the guy driving his van with 2 kids, stopped to help someone, was a Reuters journalist who was wounded. The guy was trying to rescue him, and then the helicopter people saw they are rescuing wounded and recovering weapons, permission to engage, kill all of them. No? The brother of this guy, of this man, the guy who you sent troops to Iraq to save this brother, he say, the only thing that will give me comfort is if I met an American, I kill him, and I drink his blood. That will be comfort. General McChrystal say, explain that is the insurgency math. He say,
No, I understand.
there are 10 terrorists in Afghanistan. We killed 2. How many remain? 20. 10 minus 8, 20. Why? Because the friends and the families of the people killed became terrorists. That's the policy issue they have to define. But as a problem of legal design, because it's true what you say, political leaders in U.S. are voted to protect Americans. And
Well, not just America, but a lot of countries that have problems.
everyone, it's a legal
Yeah.
design, but not every country has such a big budget on defense and people who can operate around the world.
Yeah.
There are few countries who can do, no country can do that, in fact.
Yeah.
So the ability to keep people outside is unique. And then that's the problem. Then you don't care who died outside. You don't care. It's true. You know, it's a, in a book I quote, it's a crazy story. It's a Mr. Khan, who was a teacher in London, and he was Muslim, and he left a video to his daughter explaining why he became a suicide bomber and killed 6 people. Because he said, it's my duty to revenge my fellow Muslims, because this country, democratic country, is killing them with no problem. And the voters don't care about them, so I should do something for them. He felt his duty was to protect his people. So that's what you are doing with the war on terror, transforming nice people like the teacher or the brother into terrorists.
Well, we are running out of time. I know somebody's going TikTok. And so I'm going to leave it up to you guys to take on that last statement.
Would you guys prefer me to stand, sit? I just want to know if there's like a preference from the room. Okay, awesome. Hello. Just a quick introduction. My name is Mia Rodriguez. I'm a second-year political science major at Florida International University. Go Panthers. I'm here on behalf of the DC Fly-In, and my question.
Where did you born?
Excuse me.
Where did you born?
Where was I born?
Yeah.
Hialeah, Florida.
Okay.
You could hear the Miami accent.
No, because you were you were nodding when I.
He was hoping you were Argentinian.
No. I was hoping. No. I was trying to know. Normally, foreigners agree with me very easily. That's why I was checking that.
Yeah, I'm actually.
You're American.
Yes, Cuban American. My parents came from Havana, Cuba.
Okay.
And I wanted to ask a question regarding what you were discussing about geopolitical assertions. It's not the specific word that you said, but what you said earlier about how this is not an IR room, I do believe is a disservice to the international legal community going forward, because if we do not address the international community, how can we better the international community through a legal design? So when it comes to implementing this legal design that you have discussed just now in this question, how can we move forward with that when it comes to P5 countries using their powers? For example, in the ICJ, their decisions can be influenced from what the United States or Russia wants to see from a certain decision. So how can, with these legal designs, how can we account for bias even when trying to make decisions that reflect the international community as well as international legal principles that should be upheld?
Okay. Thank you.
Should
Look-
we take another question and
Okay.
then you answer both?
Hi, I'm Jorge Huetri from Nicaragua. And I wonder if you care to say a few words about what's happening in Nicaragua and if it will ever be possible to bring the Ortegas to
Okay. Okay, starting from the first question. Thank you, both questions are interesting. What is interesting in the world today, because the legal design in the US was done in 18th century. And the UN Charter is 19th century. Okay, was adopted in 20th century, fine. But technology changes so fast in the last 10 years, 15 years, no? I have the daughter of a friend of mine who say, "Oh, mommy, oh my God, it's so old. It looked like 2010. It's so 2010." I normally laugh when I would think, "Oh my, it's 2010. It's all." But you know what? I was trying to understand movies, and then I watched Newsroom, a miniseries on journalists. It's 2011, and they are using Blackberries. And it was so old. It's so old. It's so 2011. Oh my God. So technology is changing. We are connected and communicated, and that is something new is happening. So the system, the Congress with representation was created when there was no connection between people and the Congress. Now it's different, and that way it's completely different. And so it's changing so fast. So if you're a clever individual, you can change the game. The best example I have is the Libyan ambassador. 3 days after the rebellion in Libya, Ismail Dabashi was the second ambassador Libya in the UN, decided that he had to change. So in the morning, he called the people in the embassy saying, "Look, I will not represent Gaddafi. I will call for a press conference this afternoon to inform I am representing the people. You can choose. It will be dangerous for my family in Libya, so be careful. But if you like to be with me, you could be with me. 12 with him." But one of them say, "But what about the main ambassador? He was very close to Gaddafi. So what do we do with him? Let me manage him." Dabashi was so clever. What he did was, 15 minutes before the press conference, he called the main ambassador, who was hidden in his house, trying to understand what to do because the country was a mess and he was trying to find him some position. So Dabashi, the deputy ambassador, called the main ambassador and said, "Ambassador, I called for a press conference to explain what happened in Libya. Any instruction for me? Do whatever you want." Okay. Okay, thank you. So he defected in agreement with the main ambassador without challenging him. So now he's a deputy ambassador thinking about. Don't take ideas, Jorge. Control your deputy. So he did that. But the second clever idea that he did because he understood the UN game, in the press conference, he requests an ICC referral to transform the country. And he knows he needed the UN Security Council approval. And he knows it's a short time he had because the Security Council moved very fast. And so he got some traction, but he needed to move. What he did was the following. The following day, the main ambassador did not come to the office, of course. So what he did is send a note verbal to the Secretary General informing that the main ambassador will not go in. And in his absence, the deputy ambassador will be in charge. The note verbal has no signature, so he did not need to sign. So himself sent a note appointing himself to replace the main ambassador. And then he became the ambassador. And then, after that, he sent a note requesting a referral to the ICC, to the Security Council. And he triggered the process. And then you have a French legal advisor who was working previously in my office who drafted a referral, including copying their full referral, and France approved it, Obama approved it, and it was approved. And that is what happened. So you don't need global incentive. It's just few people who understand the game and play smartly and took advantage of the opportunities. That's what you need. So it's difficult to change the Security Council rules, but you can change the dynamics. Focus on that. And Nicaragua, I think Nicaragua could be the region could do more. You got to talk to Ambassador Huecho here, because the region could do more. Because I think, for me, there are two issues. First, avoid any war with Costa Rica, who is still a risk. The region, Latin America, has no wars, and it's great, and we have to keep no war in the region. But then the conflict internally is something we can manage. It's complicated to manage because just the OAS has authority there. No one else has authority there. So, but again, you have to use communication and think how to do something on that. But that's the problem, because there are no legal designs protecting individuals in state no members of the ICC. You need to invent something because it's no institutional solution for you. That's the problem. When George Floyd was killed, it's automatic. In Nicaragua, nothing is automatic. You have to invent it. And you have to include, as Dabashi did, new mechanisms and find solutions.
I'm sorry, but we're going to have to end this. I do want to recognize the presence of another ICC office member, Sarah Criscatelli, who, if you have any questions, you can ask her because she was an important part, the reigning American on the team, and the reason I was able to work with Luis. Sarah brought me in.
Sarah invite you.
Yeah.
Sarah invite
Yeah.
you.
But thank you. I want you to join me in thanking Luis Moreno Ocampo and buying his book.